This morning I was driving a Bentley. I love my job. Ladies, gentlemen, and everybody else, I'm JM, and you probably have some questions, including what, why, where, when, and for good measure, what and why again. There are odd cars, and then there's this, the Isuzu VehiCROSS. So, where do we begin? I suppose at the beginning, with some funky music. Like me, you'd either never heard of the Isuzu VehiCROSS, or you had and had forgotten about it, I will forgive you. This is an extraordinarily rare car, and it seems was always destined to be that way. I was in fact recently greeted to a reminder of one place I might actually have seen it, in the very unloved 2000 film Mission to Mars by Brian De Palma, which actually, though on balance is thoroughly average, actually has quite a bit going for it, including a few incredible sequences. However, the thing that I remarked upon, in the context of today, What Action T20 featured a character played by Gary Sinise driving a convertible version of one of these, because it clearly was such a futuristic looking car. And in a lot of ways, I guess, a character driving a kind of silly, small but pumped up 4x4 convertible was actually probably the most accurate piece of prediction in the entire film. There was genuinely a convertible version of this car, but it existed only in concept form. However, the production coupe, I suppose you'd call it, wasn't actually that much less outlandish. I think this actually might be the first Isuzu I've had on the channel. It's not the first Isuzu engined car I've had. That was the M100 Lotus Elan, and there was actually a connection between the two firms. They were both owned by General Motors, hence Lotus getting an Isuzu engine. However, they did make other cars and things that weren't trucks, including the really quite cool Piazza. Anyone got one of them? As you have probably guessed, what I'm driving today is not entirely standard. And just before you hit the comment section to moan about why I didn't choose to drive a standard one of these, I wasn't exactly drowning in offers for a regular one, and I am extremely grateful to this car's owner Neil for bringing it out to me. He bought it, and indeed I think was sent to me on account of a recommendation by his son James. So thanks very much to the pair of you. Anyway, as mentioned, the regular version of this car is already a rather wacky, weird and out there kind of thing. It began in 1993 as a concept and made production essentially unaltered, but a very short production run it was, from 1997 to 2001. Although confusingly, if my sources are to be believed, it was on sale in Japan for only 2 years, from 97 to 99, and then the USA from 99 to 2001. Total sales were not exactly impressive, just under 6,000. I'm told that in the USA they were far too expensive, more so than the equivalent Jeep, and of course over there nobody really knew or cared for an Isuzu, and nobody really knew quite what to make of it, despite the fact that in America they tried to make it a more luxurious item, chucking some red leather at the interior and the like, but it didn't work. Meanwhile, in Japan, the car was too big in terms of both physical dimensions and engine, meaning it suffered from some fairly hefty financial penalties. Right, 3-point turn hill start torture test. Isuzu VehiCROSS, how do you fare? The gearbox in this is a 4-speed automatic with a very basic and industrial looking lever. Will hold itself on a hill, which is not so bad. You may have also noticed the other lever near the gear stick, and that is because, unlike many a modern day small 4x4, this is the real deal. It was designed to be a proper off-roader, and underneath does share many components with the much larger Isuzu Trooper, including the engine, the 4-speed automatic gearbox, and some of the all-wheel drive componentry. This car has 2 different modes. The American ones, I think, were different. So this is currently running in permanent 2-wheel drive, sending power to the rear. However, when you are off-roading, it has a very clever system called Torque on Demand, which will send power as required either fore or aft. And there's a little screen to the side of the dash showing you exactly how much power it's sending and where. For the late 90s, that was pretty high tech. The rest of this, though, really is just about the oddest mix of different car components I can possibly think of. In terms of styling, it's a real oddball, this. I actually kind of like it, and I think it's an example of a car where the stickers, the extra lights, the roof rack for the full-size spare wheel actually kind of works. The reason the spare wheel is up top is because the car does have one hidden in a little cubby behind the rear door, but it's a normal size tyre, and wouldn't really be much good if one of these got flat. In case you were wondering, this car came as is. All of the modifications were done before Neil bought it. He hasn't changed anything yet. So, in terms of styling, I actually quite like it. It has real shades of the later Infiniti FX, of which I recently drove an example. Believe it or not, there are actually seats in the back, though who can get in there, I do not know. First off, the lever to tilt this seat is in a really daft place on the inside, and then even when you've shuffled them all the way forwards, there's not really much room, kind of like that much. So you have to be a contortionist to get in there, and then when you have, because of all the stickers and various things on the car, it's pretty grim in there. It's a very dark place to be. These Recaro seats are also standard. Actually quite like them. They're really figure hugging. They do feel like they should be in something like the Celica. And the roofline is also quite low. I'm long of torso, and many Japanese cars of the era I do struggle a little bit with, but this actually does give you a genuinely almost sports car-like perspective. If this was about, I don't know, 2 foot lower, it would feel genuinely sporty. You've also got in here a real clash of material. So most of it is typical cheap, nasty Japanese 1990s scratchy plastic, and then the most gorgeous, amazing, curvy piece of carbon fibre, which I'm told is standard. That's how these came, and in the middle of it, the cheapest, nastiest little door handle you've ever seen. This is so weird, this thing. This car's owner Neil bought it because 3 years ago he got into green laning, and having already had a couple of Isuzu Troopers, which he's still got, his son pointed out that the VehiCROSS existed, and so he thought, you know what, sod it, I'll buy that. It looks like a laugh, and I can't really blame him. As you might imagine, it's a car that gets many a stare and conversation at the petrol station, and is all round really quite fun. It does really have the look of being an oversized toy car, which is why it's got the big Tonka sticker on the back and the Hot Wheels ones too. The reality though was a little bit more serious. They did actually field these in the Paris-Dakar about 20 odd years ago, and this car has been done up as a sort of replica of those. Neil's current plans include taking the stickers off and reapplying them, but in a more accurate and correct way. I think that's exactly the sort of thing you should do with a car like this. It's just not something anyone can own and try and be serious in. There is an annoying whistle coming from this window. It's also just about the most rattly thing I can possibly imagine, and I think he is an absolute saint for having driven a couple of hours to meet me today. One thing I will say for it is that unlike some other 4x4s I've been in, the suspension actually isn't all that crashy. Some of them can be surprisingly firm, including real proper rally cars, but this is not one of those. I'm grateful. Also, this happens to be a rare example of a car where we came out pre-arranged and it wasn't supposed to rain today, but as you can tell, it is. And I couldn't care less. I've really not much intention of trying to throw it around a bend, because I expect these big Maxxis mud tyres aren't really designed for that, and I'm not going to really learn all that much, save for maybe how easy it is to tip the thing over. You'd hope not easy, actually. It is, after all, a very big, broad, fairly square thing. When production changed over for the US variant, the engine grew from 3.2 to 3.5 litres, though as far as I can tell, power output did not change. That may be on account of the fact the USA has considerably lower grade fuel than Japan. Official power figure, I think, is 215 horsepower. Torque, 230 pound-foot. That's 312 newton-meters. Though much of the underside was kind of lashed together from various Isuzu bits, and that's one of the reasons it's not light, 1.8 tons, there was one standout feature, and that was the car's suspension. I don't know whether it's still intact here or not, but as standard, these were one of the very few production cars to come with a monotube shock absorber with a remote heat expansion reservoir, which sounds very impressive. and apparently is typically the domain of serious, proper off-road competition stuff. That's cool. I kind of like that. Also, more impressively, is just how cheap these things are. Less than 6,000 made ever, and of course not sold in the UK market. I do believe this could be a car that is a genuine JDM one. The later one was sold in the States, but this model this year not. And still, they're not expensive. We've gone mad for everything Japanese in the last few years, but the Isuzu VehiCROSS somehow has slipped under the radar. One sold the other day at auction for less than £3,000. And that's quite annoying, because now I kind of want one. I mean, it's awful, I suppose, as a car. No room in the back whatsoever. It's rattling itself apart. Terrible NVH. Though we don't know what the fuel economy is, I'm going to make an educated guess that it's not brilliant. It's also currently steaming itself up, despite the fact it does allegedly have aircon. Maybe that's not working. And, yeah, it's daft. I definitely don't need one. But now I really want one. Apparently a good one is likely to set you back a bit more, but still only £5,000 to £6,000. Neil estimates, between various Facebook groups and other sources, that on the roads of Britain today there might be about a dozen of these. And that sounds kind of right to me. I really love this. Now, to take this properly green laning, doing serious stuff, it's missing a few things. It doesn't have a snorkel and it doesn't have a winch. Though it does have the really cool, very typical Japanese little wing mirror over there that I quite like. That whistle would get really annoying really quickly. Indicators are as you would expect them on the Japanese position, so they're on the right, which is where I prefer them. Brake feel is actually quite good. Visibility is kind of awful because you've got this very, very steeply angled A-pillar here that's also quite broad. Your 3/4 to the right is just about okay because the B-pillar's far back, but over there, it's tragic. It's really tragic. And behind you is not really any better because the spare wheel means that the rear window is, well, almost an afterthought. So take all of that, and it's really not much of a surprise this failed to sell in great quantities, but it wasn't really ever supposed to. As far as I can tell, this was a car really designed to showcase who Isuzu were and what they could do, both in terms of off-road capability and also manufacturing techniques. Building a car to this lower volume is actually a very, very difficult thing to do. They'd use different types of molds and all sorts of stuff to achieve the panels and fitment that they have. In other words, this was a loss leader to get bums in trooper seats. And you know what? Better than a controversial social media marketing campaign, isn't it? This is a seriously, seriously cool car. It is such an oddball vehicle, really, that to talk about dynamics feels almost inappropriate. But if you want to know on road, unsurprisingly, its manners aren't the best. The suspension, better than you'd expect. The engine does have some poke in it. Put your foot down, the gearbox will shift, it'll make more noise, but doesn't really go any faster. And the steering is kind of doing that all the time. This just isn't a car you buy for the grey bit. You buy it for the green bit. Anyone doing any green laning in East Anglia anytime soon? Can I come along? So, there we have it. I've driven some pretty unusual cars in my time, but this has got to be up there. I want to say a huge thank you to Neil for bringing this car out, and to his son James for persuading him to buy it. And as ever, a big thanks to all of you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.